2025 is shaping up to be a massive year for RPGs, and Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon from Questline and Awakened Realms, has finally left early access to make its full debut on Xbox consoles. With over 2 years of development over on PC, this dark reimagining of Arthurian legend places players in a world corrupted by the weirdness and ravaged by the Red Death Plague. My name is Fletcher, and this is Xbox Nation, and in today's review we'll explore the story, world, quest combat, and performance of Tainted Grail. So let's dive right in and find out if this grim RPG is a must play or if it gets lost in all the weirdness. First up, it's easy to say that Tainted Grail's narrative is front and center here. It's very dense, reactive, and morally complex. The legendary King Arthur is gone, Avalon is decaying, and the choices you make significantly change the world and outcomes. From the start, major decisions really alter the plot trajectory, making your journey feel uniquely yours, and fans of RPGs with tons of choice-driven narratives will feel right at home here. The main storyline, which can run about 30 to 40 hours, is packed with tons of twists, large-scale moral dilemmas, and a strong focus on agency. But if you want to dive into all the content, you are easily looking over 60 hours worth of content. This game does storytelling so well that it doesn't just ask you to watch, it demands your entire participation. From your first encounter with factions vying for power to deeply personal quests involving betrayal, loss, and redemption, Tainted Grail ensures that your decisions carry weight every single time. Dialogue trees here branch significantly, and there's so many outcomes that aren't simply good or evil, they're actually morally ambiguous. This emotional engagement really elevates the overall storytelling, really forcing you to consider consequences long after your choice is made. The side narratives are just as rich as well. In one instance, a grieving widow will ask you to help her retrieve a keepsake from her husband's plague-ridden corpse. Whether you risk your life or find another way, the resolution impacts both your standing in the local village and how future quests will really unfold. This level of interconnection between story threads creates such a lived-in world where it really reacts to you and ultimately remembers you. Compared to recent RPGs such as Avowed, this game really excels at providing true narrative replayability. You're not just watching a story unfold, you're co-authoring it with every single step, and the game respects your investment by reflecting your impact at every turn. The World of Avalon is oppressive, melancholic, and deeply atmospheric. It draws clear inspiration from the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion and the Witcher series, but trades their grandeur for something more intimate and unsettling. Characters here aren't just lore dispensers, they're living, voiced personalities with genuine depth, and the voice acting here is pretty good. Every NPC reaction does feel incredibly meaningful, and lore isn't just buried behind endless reading. You learn through dialogue and discovery here. The environmental storytelling is just utterly superb. There are tons of caves that are just littered with remnants of failed expeditions, there's burnt out homes that tell tales of hasty retreats, and statues of long forgotten kings that loom silently watching over some ruined cities. The world here feels very ancient, not just in its age, but also its sorrow, and this is a kingdom that also remembers, as every location reflects the scars of war, plague, and the time period. Exploration, though, as you may be wondering, is both rewarding and incredibly addictive. You will definitely get stuck into that Elder Scrolls loop of sort of having a look over the horizon and wondering what's really over there. Whether that's scavenging for crafting your materials or uncovering some different hidden quests, the variety in these different locales keeps everything feeling incredibly fresh. The alchemy system, inventory management, and the optional player housing add so many layers to the overall engagement. Of course, the side quests, as I mentioned in particular, are the real standouts here. They're not just filler like you see in the Witcher games, they're actually stories in their own right, often with multiple different outcomes and deeply tied to the game's lore and its overall theme. I do have to say as well that if you're going into this wanting to have some pretty good crafting, then I have to say it feels essential rather than optional this time. From potions that can enhance your combat effectiveness to traps and poisons that will definitely give you an edge in different encounters, this system here invites your experimentation wholeheartedly. The weight management mechanic is also pretty generous, but still forces some sort of strategy upon it, especially for those of you who love looting every barrel and crate, like myself. There are also spontaneous events that you'll come across which keep the world really engaging. One moment you'll be ambushed by a travelling cult, and the next you're invited to a secret ceremony in the forest. These unscripted diversions often lead to full-blown quest chains and feel like organic parts of the world rather than scripted content. At night, you will be able to experience what's called the weirdness, which which is essentially a fog which descends on the land. Basically, enemies become a ton stronger as they get overcome by this weirdness, and then you'll find some lost souls or even some big towering bosses that will ambush you out the blue. I tell you what, these bosses aren't to be threatened with as well, because they will kill you immediately. So I recommend in the earlier levels, you definitely rest at a campfire and wait until the next morning. That said though, the difficulty curve in this game can be pretty uneven with that. With no level scaling, some areas do become quite punishing too early, and that forces you into detours into side content to remain competitive. Whilst this game really does encourage your exploration, it can also break pacing for those of you who prefer a straight shot throughout the main story. Still, the game's non-linear design does make every discovery feel incredibly earned, which is more than compensating for those pacing hiccups. Now, here's where the experience starts to show some cracks. Combat in Tainted Grail is simplistic. You can think of it like classic Oblivion style melee with some basic parrying and dodging thrown in. Of course, you can also summon allies or cast spells, or even use some ranged attacks with different bows. But the hit detection with these is rather inconsistent, and ranged combat at the moment feels very clunky at the time of this recording. I did play this game mostly as a melee warrior, and quickly found the combat was getting pretty repetitive by the halfway mark. It does certainly do the job by any means, but barely evolves over time, and I kind of wish that there was a better aspect than just sort of hit, dodge, parry, and repeats. Even though the combat is a bit basic, there's a basic class system at play here, and while you can mix and match your abilities, the game subtly pushes you towards a singular specialization. It's not an egregious thing to see in an RPG like this, but you can change your abilities later in the game, but upon choosing a class at the start of the beginning of the game, this kind of sets the course of what you can experience. I leaned heavily into the necromancer / warrior hybrid, and while summoning the undead was pretty cool, the strategy often boiled down to just bait and slash. Combat encounters here, while visually varied, rarely require complex tactics. The AI is often really easy to exploit, making even big boss fights feel more like puzzles of timing than actual challenges. There were many times I would summon an ally for them to just take the hits, while I went behind the boss and finished them off in little to no time, as it essentially gave me extra damage for essentially backstabbing them. It's a very easy exploit at the moment, and the AI definitely needs some additional work. The RPG mechanics though as a whole do fare a bit better. Gear here is absolutely plentiful, though balance is certainly an issue when heading into the second and third acts of the game. Some weapons feel overpowered very early on, while others remain useless throughout, and enchanting and upgrading your very own gear is straightforward but does lack a bit more depth. The real value though in the RPG system comes from character progression, so stuff like investing in speech, stealth or survival opens up some brand new quest paths, and dialogue options along with exploration perks are very welcome. As I mentioned though, ranged and stealth builds at the moment are very underwhelming, and I think they need reworking at this current moment in time. Magic of course does have its moments, and they do have some spectacular fashion, but enemy reactions to this are very minimal, making impact feel pretty diluted. While the dodge and parry systems do add a little bit of flair, especially to this sort of RPG genre, they don't carry the same weight necessarily to keep long-term engagement like we see over in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. There is a lot of potential here, especially in the summoning and the parrying system, but it's currently pretty underbaked, and I have no doubt that this will be improved on over time. It's not to say that the combat system is pretty terrible, because it isn't. It just needs some more refinement to make it truly stand out from the crowd. But then again, RPGs like this aren't really reliant on amazing combat to create such a great experience. So I actually tested Tainted Grail on both the Xbox Series X and S consoles, splitting my playtime pretty evenly. The game gives you an unexpected amount of visual customization for a console title, everything from resolution to detail scaling. There's no dedicated quality or performance mode, but they are still there in more simplistic versions. Instead though, you're more offered a PC style slider. While the goal is 60 FPS on both consoles, actual performance is hit or miss on both of them. At 1080p, with me playing the majority of the way through on the 7 on the slider, this game looks pretty decent, but does suffer from frequent dips in frame rate, especially in enemy heavy scenes or when loading into a brand new area or just fast traveling. Worse still are the insane amounts of crashes. I actually faced over a dozen hard crashes in a single 6-hour session, and these stability issues seriously hurt the experience and will take you out of being immersed in this overall world. Of course, there are a ton of bugs here as well, from NPCs sort of doing T-poses, or you'll be pushed around by your own summons during a cutscene, which makes it utterly hilarious. But I'm kind of becoming a little bit fond of these quirky little bugs every now and then, and really gives me that sort of reminiscent tone of Oblivion and the Skyrim games. Visually though, the game, as you can see, really isn't too groundbreaking in terms of fidelity, but it still remains very atmospheric. If you drop the settings to low, which is essentially 1 on the scale, it becomes very blurry and often a very dully and lackluster experience. All of the textures look like they blur, lighting flattens, and the visual magic really evaporates. You can even see the likes of fauna and simplistic grass patches being turned into literally green splotches, and to be honest, it really doesn't look great. There is potential here, but optimization is sorely lacking at the moment, especially on both the Xbox consoles, and until performance is patched, I can't fully recommend you buy it right now on the Xbox consoles. I do have to say though that the audio design definitely deserves a lot of praise. The ambient soundtrack blends eerie strings with melancholic piano motifs and sound cues like the distant howl of the weird tainted beasts that build tension effectively. Voice acting was also another big surprise here. Almost every NPC is fully voiced, adding so much immersion despite the sometimes awkward facial animations. I know many of you also asked a question in previous videos about the third-person perspective which was added into this game on its 1.0 launch. I have to say, if you're diving into this one fully to expect to play it in third person, I wouldn't buy this game at the moment. This game's sole purpose is to be played in first person. It is nice to have that third person perspective being added in, but currently the hit registration, along with how the graphics look, and also how your character looks just in the third person view, especially on horseback, looks utterly atrocious. I have to say, it does give you a pop-up warning saying this game was designed for first person view, so definitely avoid it if you want that third person perspective. Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon really is a hauntingly immersive RPG with top tier storytelling and world building. It does excel in its character writing, its lore integration and player-driven narrative, and also the exploration and quest of a genuine satisfaction. However, it is held back by some overly simplistic combat and some poor performance currently on both the Xbox consoles. It's not a perfect experience, but for my entire playtime, it was a pretty memorable one. If you're the kind of player who values a reactive world, morally complex choices, and deeply engaging lore, then Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon delivers that in tons of spades. If your priorities lie though in more fluid gameplay and stable performance, you may want to wait for a few more patches down the line. Right now though, I'm giving Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon a 7 out of 10. With future updates, that could easily jump to an 8 or even a 9, and I will visit this game later on in the year. If you value narrative depth over polished gameplay, it's well worth your time. However, if performance matters more, maybe hold off a bit until we see some future patches. So that's my review for Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon. Make sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed this review and want to see more like this on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe as well, as I do cover Xbox content every single day. Whilst you're here though, why don't you check out my other review on screen now of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. You definitely won't want to miss this game, and I want you to see why I recommend this as a Game of the Year candidate.